Hey guys, welcome back to Medical Coding with Blue. Today's episode is all about the things you should know before becoming a first-time remote medical coder. If you are brand new to my channel, welcome. I am Blue, I'm a medical coder. Okay, so you want to become a medical coder, but not just that, you want to become a remote medical coder right away. All right, so I'm going to talk about some of the things that make remote coding good and some of the things that are going to make remote coding bad for a first-time medical coder. Preface this whole video with this little disclaimer first. Some of the things that I'm going to say today are not going to make you happy. I can pretty much guarantee it, but that's okay because I'm here to give you guys the real deal, okay? I'm not trying to sell anything. There is nothing that I'm trying to convince you to get into. This is actually information from a real-life medical coder who has been through it, been there, done that, got a t-shirt, okay? So let us begin. I have worked in remote coding. I was a remote coder many years ago. I did same-day surgeries for a level 1 trauma hospital. So you want to talk about difficult charts to get through. Keep in mind, I already had experience for many years. And of course, the beginning of the pandemic saw me being a remote coder again because I did spend 5 months at home until I was able to go back to the facility. So the thing about coding at home, especially when you're brand new, is this. You're not going to have somebody around to ask questions to. And not only that, when you are asking questions, you're going to be doing it either virtually or you're going to be doing it by instant messenger or over the phone, which can make things a little bit more difficult because sometimes it's almost impossible to formulate the question that you need to ask, right? I've been there. I've had instances where I'm looking at the chart. I know what I'm trying to get to, but I can't process it into words, which is really weird, but it does happen, especially when you're thinking all day, because that is what medical coders do, is think all day, which is why when I get done for the day, I like to watch trashy reality TV. I mean, that is just, we all have our thing, where you just kind of relax and chill, but whatever. Anyway, going back to the topic. When you're at home, there is nobody to stand over you, which is great, right? It's nice to not have somebody behind you watching what you do. I can't take being micromanaged. That's number one. Forever in my life, I cannot stand that. But when you are at home, that means you have to govern yourself. A lot of times when you're working remotely, the productivity is going to be a little bit higher than it would if you were in a facility because their thought process, the employer's thought process is you're at home. You should have zero distractions. So you should be able to produce more. Not only that, your accuracy can potentially be higher than a facility's as well. So it really all depends where you're applying and what their standards are. Now, COVID changed the way that brand new medical coders are getting hired. At the time when the pandemic first hit, a lot of companies were going ahead and hiring people to work at home, even though they had no experience, because everybody was desperate. And they still need medical coders, regardless of if a pandemic is going on or not, right? So with this in mind, they said, okay, some people can get hired. And I've had many of my viewers write in and say, Blue, I just passed my certification, and after some looking, I was able to find a job coding from home because of what we were in. Now that a lot of places are sort of transitioning their workers back into the facilities, sometimes they are doing like a hybrid schedule where they're at home some days and then at work some days, and then some are just leaving their workers at home. It really all depends on the facility and what their policies are. So you have to keep that in mind when you are applying. Now, if they are not really trying to hire you right now because you don't have the experience, keep in mind that most times when it is not a pandemic going on, they do expect for medical coders to have 3 to 5 years of experience before they start working at home. The reason that they want you to have this is because at least by 3 to 5 years in, you are seasoned well enough to understand what is truly going on with these records, and you're able to get through them and not have questions, but have questions and that kind of thing. But it's not where it's going to stall you. If you're brand new and you see the difference between coding from a book and coding in the real world, it's a huge wake-up call because the difference is like night and day. You're going to have some providers who document extremely wonderful. Then you're going to have others that are going to be not as direct in the way that they're writing. And then maybe they're going to be using words that are not familiar to you. Maybe you can't find it in the book, because doctors are not required to use the language that's in the books in order to get their records coded. So this is where your technical knowledge of medical terminology, anatomy, and pathophysiology come into play, because you have to understand what you're reading. Medical coding is all reading comprehension. That is 100% of what it is. And I've had people who write in and say, well, Bleu, I struggle with reading comprehension. This is not a negotiable issue in medical coding. You have to understand what you're reading. There is no getting around that. And sometimes people, if the English is not their first language, they struggle. But I've seen a lot of them where, English is not their first language and they're able to read and understand. And sometimes it takes them a little bit longer. So, productivity may be an issue for a while. But that is something that you need to think about. You need to think about all your pluses and minuses before you start trying to pursue this career at home. I always recommend, especially to brand new medical coders, that you start someplace that you have to go. I know this is something that a lot of you don't want to hear, especially when you're like, well, Bleu, I have small children at home. Working at home would be great. Yes, working at home would be great with small children. The only thing about this is you have to be able to concentrate on your work. You cannot stop and start every few minutes because your child needs you. Yes, there's going to be people who have children who need extra time with them, but at the same time, that's not conducive to working. You have to be able to set yourself up for success. Otherwise, you're not going to meet productivity, and you're certainly not going to meet accuracy, because you can't get into that steady stream of thought if you have to keep stopping and starting. And a lot of people think, oh, it's so great to work at home because then I can just throw in a load of laundry and I can run out real quick and do an errand and come right back home and just get going. It's not the way that it works. Every single medical record that we touch, every single entry that we do for the patients is all timed. Everything is timed. So if you think that you can just sneak out of the house and come right back in, that is literally like going AWOL and like leaving your workplace. You have to treat your home office like you're at the office and only take your breaks on your designated times. And that's what you have to do when you're working at home. You have to treat it like you're going to the office. And a lot of people are like, well, it's so great because you don't have to dress up and I can just roll out of bed and just get into working that way. For some people, this works. For a good amount of people, it's going to do the opposite. So your brain automatically goes with whatever you're doing. If you're dressing up, if you're dressing yourself up, you're getting up, you're doing all your thing to get ready, your brain is going to kick into this mode like, oh, okay, well, it's time to work. We're going somewhere. We're going to do something. So that's why I always tell people, if you're working at home, you need to get up, get dressed like you're going to the office. And even if you're sitting at home, you still need to get into that mindset, because even if you are at home and that's the only time that you're there, you never know that you may have to get like a phone call, a video call with a provider. And what are you going to do? Oh, hold on, I got to go put my face on. You have to make sure that you're already ready to go and you can see somebody instantly, because you're at work. It's not where you're going to be like, oh, okay, I'm just going to throw a t-shirt on and be okay. You can't do that, guys. It's a lot about that. You still have to have that same frame of mind, but not being able to ask questions to anybody because there's nobody around. And are you going to call your lead or your supervisor every few minutes when you do have a question? It's going to slow you down. And not only that, that supervisor or that lead is going to start wondering if you were the right choice. So this is why I tell you guys, starting in a place that you have to go is the way to start your career. Because trust me, if you think that you're strong in school, wait till you get into the real world. It's going to be a complete turnaround because you're going to learn a lot of new things. Now, sometimes these companies are willing to train people, but their training involves their hospital or their facility systems. and how to use them. That's their training. It's not on how to teach you to be a medical coder. If you have questions, once in a while here and there, sure, they will answer your questions, because that is what we do as medical coders. We ask each other questions. But the thing about just asking questions all the time is going to be like, okay, then you got your certification. You should know how to code. Everybody who gets their certification should know the basic fundamentals of how to code, meaning that you know how to look things up in the book, you know how to arrive at different diagnoses selections, how to arrive at different procedure selections, and that kind of thing. Yes, there's going to be a lot of things that you're going to learn as you go. Oh, believe me, I have been there. And it's going to take time. You're not going to know everything right out of the gate. But if you have that base foundation down, then you're going to be okay. But don't look at getting into this field. This is my advice, guys. Don't look to getting into medical coding because you want to code at home. Look at medical coding and want to get into medical coding because you want an intellectual challenge. There's other things of like working at home and doing all these other things. Those things come with time typically, all right? But look at medical coding as what it is. It is a mental challenge. It is an intellectual challenge every day. And that is what it is. If that's what you're looking for, then you're in the right place. But it's going to be very easy for you to get frustrated if you have no assistance and no support as you're going through this process. And you're going to feel like you're alone and by yourself. For some people, they think that working at home is so great. And then they realize they miss the human connection. They miss the human contact. So that has a lot to do with it too. You know, people sort of don't think about that. Like, even when the pandemic started and we all got sent home, I immediately felt that disconnect from people, especially with my providers, because I was so used to being there with them in the hall, you know, in my office, and they're knocking on the doors. The first week of the pandemic, when we had to be at home, because they told us basically go get your computer, grab it and bring it home. Everybody had to be out of the facility like that. They wanted nobody in the facility. Grab your stuff and get home. And so that's what we had to do. And of course, everybody was scared at the time, you know, when the pandemic hit, because, oh my gosh, you know. So, you know, I'm grabbing my stuff, getting home. And then the next day when I'm starting my first day at home, I was so lost, like lost from, there was no chaos outside. There was no noise. Everything was so quiet. And it was so boring. I mean, I could not get over how bored I was. And I always fancy myself that I don't get bored. I don't get bored because I can entertain myself in other ways, right? By reading or doing whatever. And then I think, oh my gosh, that's what this is. This is complete and total isolation. This is boredom. This is what this is. And there was almost no escaping it because, of course, we're all at home at the time, right? But it wasn't like how I had been a remote coder years ago when I had done work for the level 1 trauma hospital for same-day surgeries. That experience was way different because I was still able to be out with people and still able to make my social connections. And at the time I was active in the church and I was doing a lot of those things. So that helped me through that time. But literally just, you're at home and it was like 24/7 when the pandemic hit. I would log in, work, and it was, again, so quiet. My productivity fell. My accuracy stayed good, but my productivity fell. And to the point where it's like, my boss is like, are you okay? Because like, you never normally don't hit. I'm like, it's hard for me. This is too difficult. So I started having to like turn the TV on and play the radio and things like that, which I normally would never do, but it was just that white noise that I needed in order to be able to get through that time. And yes, we're living in a different time now, but when you code from home, you really need to take all of these things into consideration and don't dismiss the details of human connection and human contact. And the fact that you're saying, well, maybe I want to do this because, you know, I want to be at home with my kids. Your kids may be a distraction for you. So you really need to consider that. And you can't expect an employer to be able to work around your schedule with your children. That's not their business. Their business is to continue their business, to grow their business, and they're going to look for the best possible candidate that they absolutely can. So they want people who are going to be able to concentrate. They want people who are going to be able to produce what they need to and be self-starters and do the things that they need to do without having so much direction. Because again, they can pull reports all day long and see how long you were in the record and how many you did. And then of course, they're going to be checking your accuracy. So these are all the things that you need to think about before you get so excited and gung-ho about starting at home. Start at a facility, guys, especially when you're brand new. I am begging you guys to start at a facility so that way you can get that knowledge. Now, I don't know how long it's going to be where now if they're going to allow people to work at home or not. A lot of places around where I am are making their workers come back to work. And I've been back at the facility since the fall. So there's a thing out there that is going to be different in every area because the pandemic is still raging in some areas, and in other areas it is under control. So it really depends on where you are. But I want you guys to think about that. Coding from home is not all it's cracked up to be. And I hate to see people get discouraged about even getting into the field because this is absolutely what they want. Sometimes you have to start in a different area before you get to what you think that you want. Because when you get to what you think that you want, sometimes it's not so great. And sometimes it's not what you think it's going to be. Because again, not having those coworkers around to be able to bounce questions off of is going to really play a huge impact, especially when you're brand new. When you have experience, and as I experienced when I did same-day surgery coding at home, that was fun for me because it was just a challenge. And again, I had my social network already in place, so that was fine. But working at home, it was just like, oh, okay, it's this. And I worked at the time for a very wonderful boss. I had a wonderful company that I worked for. So there was a lot of flexibility with what I did. But again, I'd had years of experience and I could have that flexibility because of, the time that I had already put in. And it is about having those years under your belt. And I know that a lot of times for people, especially in the beginning, it's like, how do you get a job if no one will hire you? And I always tell people, keep applying. But you may run into a challenge, especially if you're insisting on trying to get remote coding from home. Okay, so even if, because I get a lot of emails from people who say, Blue, I have a disability. Can I do this from home? It's really going to depend on your employer, number one. And number two, your employer is required to be able to make reasonable accommodations for you if you have a disability. So that is something to know. This is the law. There is no breaking the law. This is the law. You have to follow the law, which, we have the Disability Act, so to be able to protect people who have disabilities and be able to have reasonable accommodations for them. So that is something that you have to think about, and you have to be willing to meet that employer halfway as well. It can be just insisting on, oh, I need to stay at home. If you have an issue where perhaps it's an anxiety issue, this is something that you really do need to work with a professional on or work with yourself, because you are going to have to be able to communicate with providers. Some places do have a person who does this. Sometimes it's a CDI, sometimes it's a supervisor, but sometimes it may be you. This is part of our profession, and this is something that a lot of coders will try to shy away from. This is not something to shy away from. The better communication and relationships that you have with providers, the better. And now for some places, it's just the coders just code and somebody else takes care of it. But don't rely on that's going to be for everybody, because that's not always the case. So some food for thought. But yes, I just want you guys to think about all of these things before you start trying to insist on becoming a remote medical coder right out of the gate, because times are changing and that may not be in the cards for you. But it's not always bad to work at a place either. Now, working at a place, of course, you're going to have coworkers, and sometimes coworkers can be very difficult, yes. But if you are fortunate enough to be able to be in like a clinic setting next to your providers, that's who you need to focus your energy on, not your coworkers. If you have a difficult time with coworkers, trust me, been there, done that, got a t-shirt. But the thing that you have to focus on is why you are there. Why are you there? You're not there for your coworkers. You're there for your providers. You're there in turn also for the patients. That's why you're there. And sometimes it helps to ease that burden of how you feel about maybe your coworkers or the situation that you're in, because sometimes people are not as easy to get along with. And I understand that because we've all been there. But it really depends on how you look at things. How are you looking at the situation? And you have to kind of work with that. I know, because I've had to do that many times. I've gotten better over the years because it does take a bit of self-growth to be able to figure that out. And it took a lot for me to be able to figure that out. But now there's a freedom to that. There's a freedom to, I'm not bothered by coworkers. I'm not, because that's not why I'm there. I'm not there for them. I'm there for my providers. So that's just my advice today anyway. But again, think about it, guys. You know, don't just insist, especially because this is brand new. It's something that you're not quite sure what you're walking into. And a lot of times when people are brand new, sometimes they don't always get the best training in the world. And that's another thing. When people get training that is very quick and they say, oh yeah, you'll learn on the job, they'll teach you. That's not fair. But a lot of schools will say that. And it's so frustrating because that's not the employer's job to train you. It's the school, whoever you paid, it's their job to train you. There are things that are specific to facilities and to doctor's offices and clinics, yes. But the fundamentals, no. That's the school, that's the instructor's job. That's their position to do, not the employer. Unless the employer is doing on-the-job training. That's something different. Because there are some out there like that, because they don't quite understand, but they know they need a coder. So they say, okay, well, you're good enough, and we'll go ahead and train you. And so everybody's just kind of learning along the way. That's something different. But when you're coming in and you're certified, oh yeah, you're expected to, and you should know how to code. I'm just saying. I'm going to wrap this one up. That's my message for today. I hope that you will hit that subscribe button if you haven't already. Like this video. Share it if it helped you. Share it with somebody who may be considering getting into remote medical coding right out of the gate. Let them know this is a reality. All right. I will see y'all on the next video. Bye.